The HOA stole my dog while I was at work, claiming he barked too much. Thor had always been noisy. A healthy, cheerful, slightly clumsy golden retriever, like every happy dog should be. He barked when he saw the mailman, when he heard unusual footsteps on the sidewalk, when other dogs passed by, or when the garbage truck stopped out front. But he was never aggressive. He never bit anyone, never left the yard, never crossed the property line. He was just a dog, being a dog. When I moved to this neighborhood 3 years ago, I imagined I'd find peace, beautiful houses, well-kept streets, an organized community. Actually, too organized. I soon discovered that the HOA controlled every detail with an iron fist and endless meetings. The grass couldn't exceed a certain length. The fence color had to be approved. Non-standard plants triggered formal warnings. I thought it was over the top, but I took a deep breath, tried to adapt. Except Thor didn't know how to be discreet. At first, there were a few casual complaints, an anonymous note in the mailbox. "Your dog barks too much. Please fix it." Then a neighbor, always with that fake smile, told me casually, "Oh, your dog is so beautiful. Too bad he barks so much, right?" I thought it was just a fussy neighbor. Someone who doesn't like pets, wanting a cemetery-quiet neighborhood. I kept living my life, taking Thor for walks, giving him weekly baths, keeping his vaccines up to date. He was my partner, my companion after a whole day at work. But over time, the signs got more serious. The first fines arrived. Small at first. Noise disturbance violation. Then came written warnings copied to the condominium board. HOA meetings started happening in secret. They kicked me out of the groups, stopped greeting me. Neighbors who used to smile at me now avoided eye contact. Nobody responded to my good morning anymore. Good. It was as if I had broken some silent rule and was being socially punished for it. I started to worry. I tried talking. I wrote a letter apologizing for any inconvenience. I even bought a bark-reducing collar, against my own will, just to show I was trying to cooperate. But nothing worked. That Friday, I left the house at 7 in the morning like always, gave Thor his food, left fresh water, patted his head and said, "Behave yourself, big guy. Tomorrow we'll go on a long walk." I came back at 6 in the evening. The street was strangely quiet. I entered through the back gate and called, "Thor! Come on, boy." Silence. I called again. No bark, no sound of paws on the ground. I ran to the backyard. The gate was locked, as always, but the space, empty. His collar was hanging there, his water bowl untouched. The red ball, he never let go of it, was all alone in the corner. I panicked, searched the house, called neighbors, looked around the neighborhood. Nothing, no sign, no barking, no clue. And then I saw it. Stuck to my front door with tape was a white envelope, no return address. Inside was a letter on HOA letterhead. Cold, bureaucratic, impersonal. "We inform you that, after repeated complaints and considering the inconvenience caused by the dog Thor, the HOA authorized the animal's removal by a specialized team. This action aims to preserve the well-being of the community. We appreciate your understanding. HOA." My hands trembled. My stomach turned. I reread that paper at least 10 times. Removed? What do you mean removed? Who do they think they are to take my dog without even warning me? What kind of organization believes it can enter someone's property and seize a pet as if it were unwanted trash? I sat on the porch steps holding the crumpled paper, my chest wide open with pain. Thor was more than just a dog. He was my home, my balance, my silence after chaos. And now, he was gone. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I just sat there, motionless. The anger was still building up, like a silent storm. But one thing was certain. This wasn't going to end like that. It was only beginning. The next morning, before the sun rose, I was already up, with dark circles under my eyes, my face swollen, and my eyes burning from not sleeping at all. During the night, I had watched my home's security footage at least 20 times, looking for any movement at the gate, a sound, a clue of how and when Thor was taken. But there was nothing. They had turned off the cameras. It wasn't a rushed or improvised action. They had planned it. The first thing I did was call the HOA's number, which, of course, went straight to voicemail. Then I went to the administrative office where they'd stationed some kind of outsourced receptionist who barely looked up from her monitor. When I asked where my dog was, she replied in the most indifferent tone possible. He was removed by a noise control team and sent to the partner shelter, We have no further information. Partnered with who? Who authorized this? You couldn't just barge into my property. It's in the HOA regulations. You signed when you moved in. She handed me a plastic-covered copy of some obscure clause in the membership contract. Something about interventions in cases of proven collective disturbance and containment measures authorized in the name of general well-being. I swear I had never read that. Never imagined anyone could interpret intervention as steal your dog while you're at work. I left there shaking, went straight to that so-called shelter. When I got there, I was ready for a fight, but the woman at the front desk greeted me with a pained expression and said something that still echoes in my head. "Oh, you must be Thor's owner." "Yeah, he's no longer here." "What do you mean he's no longer here?" I asked, my voice faltering. "He was adopted out. Yesterday night. It was an emergency situation. They claimed he was aggressive and posed risks to the neighborhood. There was a direct request from your HOA with a formal authorization." "Adopted out? Without my consent? Without even telling me? He was perfectly healthy." "I just follow protocols." "Ma'am." I had a meltdown right there. I screamed, cried, banged on the desk. I demanded to see documents, records, videos, anything. All I got was a set of superficial documents, signed by someone at the HOA, with my name misspelled and an absurd description of Thor as an agitated animal with aggressive potential. Lacking vaccination records. Lies. All lies. He was vaccinated, microchipped, with a recent vet checkup, and they knew it. In that moment, something inside me broke. The pain turned to fury, and the fury became certainty. If nobody would help me, I would find the truth myself. I went back home and started calling everyone I could. Friends, veterinarians, animal rescue NGOs, lawyers. But at every turn, I hit a wall. No one wanted to get involved. When I explained the HOA was behind it, people backed away like I was talking about the mafia. In the neighborhood, the humiliation intensified. I started noticing whispers, long stares, crooked smiles. In one of the online groups, I saw a comment. Finally, they dealt with the dog from 24B. It was about time. I had become the crazy dog lady. The woman who yells at gates, rips up notices off the door, who freaks out at the shelter. And still, no one offered a hand. But I wasn't going to stop. I wasn't going to accept it. They could isolate me, ridicule me. But if they thought I'd forget Thor, they were dead wrong. I was going to scour that entire neighborhood if necessary. I'd find out where he was, who took him, why, who signed off on it. They think they're dealing with a hysterical woman, but what they've just created is a dangerous woman. Nights ceased to exist. Sleep became a privilege I could hardly remember. Obsession took over everything. I woke up and went to bed, on the nights I actually slept, thinking of Thor. His face when he saw me grab his leash, the barks he'd make when he heard my key in the gate. That over-the-top excitement of a dog that just wanted to be by my side. Now every time I passed through my gate, there was only silence. And the silence hurt more than any noise ever could. I started investigating. Alone. I gave up trying to make people like me. That was over. I didn't need sympathy anymore. I needed names, dates, evidence. I went back to the shelter, this time with a hidden recorder in my pocket. The woman at the desk recognized me from afar and called security before I even spoke. But I wasn't there to ask permission anymore. I spent the week calling other shelters, pretending to volunteer, offering to help, trying to see how quick adoptions typically worked. That's how I found something strange. A small, almost unknown shelter told me over the phone, "Oh, you're from the HOA Hillside area, right? We usually get pickups from there now and then." "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. "They have their own system. When there's a dog that barks too much or is problematic, they send it over. We just sign, receive, and pass them along. Nothing illegal, but it's kind of private." That was the first crack in the HOA's squeaky clean veneer. I kept going. I recorded everything. Neighborhood meeting? I'd be in the back, cell phone on airplane mode, camera rolling in my pocket. I started putting together a physical binder full of names, timelines, screenshots of group chats, copies of the fines I'd received. I talked to former residents, those who had the guts to move away, and one of them, safely far from the neighborhood, sent me a voice message saying, "You're not the only one. My German Shepherd disappeared the same way. They told me he ran away. But today, I'm sure that wasn't the case. Each account was like driving a nail deeper into my chest, and the more I dug, the filthier it got. I discovered that the shelter responsible for these pickups received a significant donation 2 years ago from the very HOA. And the HOA president owned a dog training business that provided calm and obedient dogs to gated communities and therapy clinics. The connection was getting clear. Thor wasn't removed, he was taken, sold. I started carrying a notebook everywhere. I wrote down every suspicious phrase, every strange look, every new name. It became an obsession. I lost friends. People close to me said I was obsessed, that I needed to move on. But they didn't understand. They took my best friend. They called me unhinged, loud, stole from me in silence. And now, I was the street-crazy lady, the one who talks to herself, who rummages through garbage, who records meetings, who writes names on a yellow clipboard, the woman who lost her dog and lost her mind. But I knew what I was doing, because beneath the contempt, the scorn, the isolation, I was getting closer. Something told me I was one step away from finding out exactly what they did to Thor, and nobody would stop me. The binder was black, thick, heavy. At first, it only had a few stapled fines, a smudged copy of the HOA note, and some suspicious shelter paperwork. But now, it was overflowing. Transcripts of audio recordings, chat screenshots, names, company documents, donation receipts, copies of old meeting minutes, records of other residents whose dogs also disappeared. It was more than a collection of evidence. It was the body of a crime. But the turning point came on a seemingly ordinary night. So ordinary I almost stayed home. I was exhausted, defeated, ready to give up for the day. But fate loves to prod us when we least expect it. The doorbell rang. A woman, wearing a mask, sunglasses, and a cap, handed me a manila envelope. She didn't give her name, didn't explain anything. She just looked at me with a hint of pity I hadn't seen in a long time and said, "Some of us still have a conscience, but speak softly. They hear everything." And then she left. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter, frantic penmanship, full of scratch-outs. She introduced herself as a former shelter employee, saying she'd been fired after questioning the direct orders they received from the HOA. How the dogs that were picked up almost never received medical evaluations, how the reports were filled out before even seeing the animal, and how in some specific cases they were instructed to adapt the records according to what the HOA needed. At the end of the letter, she wrote in trembling letters, "Thor was sold. Fake name, chip removed, forged paperwork." The buyer was directly indicated by the HOA president. At that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I couldn't even react. I just stared at the words like I was reading a death sentence. But the pain turned to action. I grabbed my dossier, organized every piece of evidence as if I were preparing a court case, and I started asking more direct questions. I called journalists, activists, NGOs. Some ignored me. Others laughed me off. But one, in particular, listened. He was an investigative reporter. When I told him part of the story, he thought I was exaggerating. But when he saw the papers, the audio recordings, the former employee's letter, his face changed. "This is much bigger than it seems." We started building a timeline. The HOA had removed at least 8 dogs over the past 18 months, all with excessive barking records, all with owners who had received similar notices. None returned, no official investigation, no citations against the association. And more, the HOA president was listed as a hidden partner in 2 companies, one supplying dogs to luxury condominiums, another a rehab clinic that used sociable and trained dogs as part of its therapy. Thor ended up in that system. A dog too noisy for the neighborhood, but perfect to be domesticated and sold elsewhere. Meanwhile, the HOA's facade remained intact. They were still seen as a benchmark in community organization and harmony. The president was called a model leader, writing columns in the local paper, attending charity events. And me? I was still the crazy lady at 24B. But now I had it all. Everything they did. And as much as it still hurt to imagine Thor somewhere far away, maybe confused, maybe waiting for me, I knew I was about to turn the tables. I was no longer a woman screaming alone. I was a woman with a dossier, and they were going down. I thought taking everything to City Hall would be the beginning of the end. That, with a folder of solid evidence, tangible proof, accounts, dates, names, connections, someone would finally say, "This is serious. We'll investigate." I walked into that office clutching the black binder to my chest as if it were my own heart, as if I still believed justice existed where there was evidence. But what I got was bureaucracy, forms, preliminary reviews, evasive answers. The civil servant who assisted me seemed more interested in finishing his coffee than hearing me out. He flipped through the pages like he was reading an appliance catalog. And when he finished, he said in the most mechanical voice, "Ma'am, you need to file a formal written complaint and wait for it to be processed. Legal will review it within 30 business days. 30 days. 30 days while my dog could be anywhere. While others might be taken. While the HOA president kept smiling for local news and earning applause in neighborhood meetings. I left in silence, but inside I was screaming. My next attempt was the press. I contacted the reporter who had listened to me before. He was shocked by City Hall's disinterest, but when he tried to publish the story on a major portal, it got stuck in editorial review, which claimed the complaint needed more official evidence. I started to suspect there was more going on. A network that protected those who knew how to work in the shadows. I went days without eating properly. I wandered the house like a ghost. The neighborhood, of course, knew I was stirring up what I shouldn't. Some started giving me even dirtier looks. Others simply ignored me. I became an annoying buzz in their peaceful routines. That same routine that, unbeknownst to them, hid a crime. And then, I got a letter, no sender, slipped under my door, a simple piece of paper folded hastily. Inside, 4 lines that froze my blood. He's at Creek Hill Farm, near the north exit. He was sent there labeled aggressive and sick. Check the records. They're lying. You weren't the only one. I took a few seconds to breathe. Creek Hill Farm. I'd heard that name before. It was a humane treatment center for animals deemed unadoptable. A place that supposedly offered painless euthanasia for dogs with severe illnesses or violent behavior. They were saying Thor was taken there to die. My chest tightened. My hands shook so much I could barely dial my phone. I called the reporter. He was silent when he read the note. Then he said, "I'm going with you." The next day, we hit the road. The farm was isolated, strangely tidy, like a stage location. An employee greeted us politely enough, but his eyes hid something. We said we were looking for a dog named Thor, recently seized by the HOA. He denied knowing anything, claimed the files were incomplete. But the reporter pressed on. We showed him the note, showed him the binder. His expression changed. He turned pale and went to the back with a, "Let me check," that took nearly 20 minutes. When he returned, he said Thor had indeed been taken in, but unfortunately euthanized for health reasons. He showed us a document, clearly altered, claiming the dog had rabies. Rabies. I almost fainted. Thor, who was vaccinated. Thor, who had a recent exam. Thor, who had never harmed a soul. I asked if they did a necropsy. They said no. If there was a photo, report, any kind of proof. Nothing. He just repeated, "It was an urgent case. We had HOA authorization. Signed by the president." At that moment, I understood. They didn't just steal my dog. They lied, falsified documents, then killed him. The world stopped. Everything moved in slow motion. Pain. Doesn't have a name. It was more than grief. It was indignation, helplessness, despair, and rage all merged into a single knot in my chest. I cried, yes, but I also felt something come alive in me. A fire that can't be put out. I wouldn't stop, because now it wasn't just for me. It was for the other names on that letter, for the other dogs, for the other houses that had their homes emptied, their barking silenced by force. I learned that justice is something else. But if the system doesn't want to do what's right, I will. And they will hear me, even if I have to scream. There was no funeral, no body, no goodbye. Thor was gone as if he'd never existed, as if he were just one more problem solved by the HOA, another inconvenient bark silenced in the name of community harmony. But he existed, and as long as I'm breathing, his pain will speak through me. The next morning, after visiting Creek Hill, I returned home unable to even open my door properly. I sat on the porch floor for hours, holding his red collar, the same one they'd left hanging on the gate like a warning, a trophy. I cried until there were no more tears. But the following day, I called my lawyer, With all the evidence I'd gathered, the anonymous letter, the doctored records, the entire dossier naming those involved, we decided to file a criminal lawsuit for theft, document fraud, criminal conspiracy, animal cruelty, and yes, animal homicide. I also took the case to the public defender's office, the district attorney, the local press. I knocked on radio station doors, wrote to columnists, posted on social media with all the files attached. And this time, someone listened. An independent journalist, the kind who's not afraid to poke a beehive, called me. I read everything. This needs to be published. It has to. The story ran 2 days later, with photos of Thor, screenshots of the messages, excerpts from the ex-employee's letter, and a headline reading, HOA may be linked to a legal scheme of exterminating noisy dogs. It was like pouring gas on a fire already burning inside me. The next day, I was summoned to an extraordinary meeting of the HOA's new interim board, set up in a rush after the story came out. The former president? She still denied everything, wearing that same rehearsed smile. But now, she looked at me with hatred. I went, of course. The meeting took place in a makeshift room at the community center. About 20 people were there, all neighbors. Some curious, some uncomfortable. And there I stood, binder in hand, finally facing the old HOA board members. You killed my dog, I said in a low, firm voice. Falsified documents, stole him from my house, forged reports, signed papers with my name spelled wrong, and sold animals like they were objects. One woman at the edge of the table looked at me with boredom and said, You really need psychological help. You're obsessed. It was just a dog. And if you'd taken better care of him, none of this would have happened. The silence that followed was like a slap in the face. I laughed. Honestly. Laughed from sheer nerves. Better care? You all broke into my property without authorization. Decided his barking was too much for your neighborhood standards and took him as if he were garbage. That's not care. That's a crime. Another ex-board member, with a smug look, added, The problem is, you never understood how community living works. You thought you could do whatever you wanted. That nobody would mind a noisy dog. I mind busybody neighbors who sweep crimes under the rug and disguise wrongdoing under regulations. And yet I don't go breaking into people's houses. They laughed. Laughed like I was some joke. Like I was alone in a delusion. But in that moment, even surrounded by judging stares, even labeled as unhinged, I didn't flinch. Because for the first time, some faces in the room were beginning to change. I saw confusion, discomfort. People who finally sensed something was deeply wrong with the peace they'd been defending. I'm suing every one of you, I said. Not just for me. Not just for the others, too. For the dogs that disappeared. For the families you silenced. For the pain you call noise. I grabbed my binder, gave the room one last look, and left without saying anything else. They still think I'm crazy. But now, they're afraid of my insanity. And they should be. Because this crazy woman will see this through to the end. Even if it's with Thor's collar in my hands and the fury of someone who lost everything. But with the certainty that I won't stop until every name involved faces, at least once, the weight of what they did. Justice may take a while, but the vengeance of truth is patient. The lawsuits began to unfold. Slowly, as usual. But they did. Meanwhile, my name was still the hot topic at neighborhood gatherings, even if I wasn't there. To them, I had become almost a legend. The woman who lost her dog and went insane, who recorded meetings, collected evidence, and now threatened to ruin the entire neighborhood's reputation over a dog that bothered everyone. But it was never about just a dog. It was about what he represented. His life, mine, and all those who were forced into silence. Now I had something they never expected. Support. After the story spread, more people started contacting me. Quietly, fearfully, but they came. An elderly lady who lost her poodle picked up because it barked at thunder. A couple who never saw their beagle again after 2 HOA fines and a corrective visit to their yard. An old man, nearly in tears, showed me an album of photos of his missing dog, saying, They told me he ran away, but he never went outside. Ever. Slowly, what was once a solitary cry became a muffled chorus. I created an online group, called it Barking Voices. We started with 4 members, then 10, 15. Before I knew it, more than 50 people were sharing similar stories. Different neighborhoods, Different states, different cases, the same pattern, the same excuse, the same silence. The scandal grew. And the HOA? It began to collapse from within. The president vanished from social media. Her dog training business shut down. Her once arrogant lawyer started postponing hearings. Then, a search warrant was executed at one of the ex-directors' homes. They combed through everything. Documents, computers, phones. I heard about it from others. But for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself a smile. I was called in for an official statement. I arrived with the black binder, now so stuffed it could barely close. I entered the police station with my head held high, sat down in front of the detective, and told him everything. Without shaking, without hesitation. Names, dates, falsifications, omissions, connections. At the end, I took out Thor's collar from my pocket, placed it on the table. This is all that's left of him, and I want you to remember it when you start thinking this was just a dog. He didn't reply. But he didn't look away either. A few weeks later, I got a call. The journalist who broke the original story phoned, not hiding her excitement. Another tip came in. Someone on the inside turned over documents proving the sale of animals with fake social security numbers. Over 20 of them. Thor's name is among them. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I felt he was there with me. Not in spirit, but in what he became. The spark. Proof that fighting was worth it. The HOA, as an institution, was officially disbanded in my neighborhood. Elsewhere, audits began. Some of those involved remain under investigation. Others disappeared. But they can't walk around like they own the place anymore. And me? I still have his collar. Sometimes I keep it in my bag. Sometimes I hang it from my car's rearview mirror. It's my daily reminder of who I was, of who they stole from me. Some neighbors still look at me like I'm a plague. They say I took things too far, that I caused trouble where there was only peace. But I learned that peace built on injustice is no peace at all. It's control. And if being the woman who exposed all of this makes me hated, so be it. Because now, I walk through the same streets as before. But those who laughed, who mocked, who ignored me, they're the ones who look away. I didn't lose. They just don't know what to do when silence barks louder than any dog. The news broke on a rainy morning. I was having coffee, distracted, trying for the first time in a long while to have a normal day. The TV was on low volume. Then the headline appeared. Former HOA president arrested on charges of involvement in illegal scheme to remove and sell animals. Her name, her face, footage of her arrest. I didn't react at first. I just sat there, mug in hand, eyes fixed on the screen. She was being escorted away in handcuffs. Head down, hair pinned back in a rush. The report mentioned charges of identity fraud, falsified documents, animal cruelty, organized crime, and theft of private property. My first feeling wasn't revenge or joy. It was a sort of tired relief. She was just one name in a growing list, but hers was the signature. The authorization. The one who lied about Thor. In the following days, everything fell apart. Creek Hill Farm, the place where they disposed of dogs deemed unwanted, was shut down by court order. Investigators found doctored records, faked vet reports, and an improvised area out back where the euthanized animals were buried without any protocol. Some still wore collars, had toys, even little notes with their name. That scene never left my head. Thor might be there. Or worse, was there. With all the mounting evidence and the case's exposure, my lawsuit for emotional damages and property loss moved forward with force. Some tried to settle. Others denied everything, but the judge was clear and firm. In the end, I was awarded a settlement of 1 million Rs. 1 million. That number felt absurd, unreal. People congratulated me like I'd won the lottery. Lawyers called, offering their services. Reporters asked what I planned to do with the money. But none of them understood. That amount could buy another house, another car, change my entire life. But it couldn't buy Thor back. It wouldn't bring back the days he ran around the yard with his red ball. It wouldn't erase the sound of his happy bark whenever I got home from work. It wouldn't give me back our walks, rainy days together, the warmth of him lying at my feet. No amount of money fills the space he left. I used part of the settlement to start an animal protection NGO. I named it Thor Is My Name. It's now fully registered and legal. We help families facing HOA abuse, mistreatment, illegal seizures. We've already stopped the removal of dozens of dogs. We forced 2 condo boards to return animals they had taken. The other part of the money remains untouched because there's nothing I want to buy. Some say I won, but I didn't. What happened wasn't victory. It was delayed justice. It was the bare minimum. The wound remains open. I still dream about him. Sometimes I wake up hearing barks that don't exist. Sometimes I talk to myself around the house, realizing I'm waiting for a response that never comes. Even so, I press on. Because every bark saved by this story is worth 1,000 sleepless nights. Every dog that stays with its family, every complaint that isn't ignored, every neighbor who thinks twice before committing cruelty disguised as organization, it's for him, for Thor. If I had to do it all again, be called insane, be humiliated, be isolated, I would. Because true love isn't abandoned. It isn't surrendered. It isn't silenced. Thor was my friend, and nobody gets to take what's mine without consequence. Now the world knows, and so do they. It took me a while to accept the idea. For a long time, even thinking about another dog coming into my life felt like a betrayal, as if allowing myself to love again meant forgetting Thor, as if making space for another living being would erase his memory. But the silence got too heavy. The house, even renovated, even buzzing with activity from the NGO, still felt empty when I came home at night. It still felt too small for the echo. The gate opened, and no one came running. And no one. No paws on the floor, no warm breath on the sofa, no anxious eyes when I walked in with grocery bags. It happened at an adoption fair. I wasn't planning anything. I was just there to represent the NGO, help with screening, talk to animal rescuers. And there he was, in the corner of a makeshift tent, lying on a worn blanket, light brown coat, spotted muzzle, droopy ears, big, expressive eyes. But what struck me most was the way he looked at me, straight on, unwavering, as if to say, well, it took you long enough, but here you are. This one's complicated, one of the volunteers said. He's been returned 3 times. Too clingy, needs constant attention, a real Velcro dog. I squatted down, slowly reached out my hand. He didn't hesitate, rested his forehead on my palm and let out a long sigh, like he was relieved. What's his name? I asked. He doesn't have one. Each home called him something different. None of them stuck. I looked at him again. Without thinking, I said, Loki. She laughed. But Loki's the god of mischief, isn't he? Exactly. And transformation, I answered. I took him home that same day. Loki arrived like he'd always lived here. Hopped on the couch, ran through the rooms, sniffed the backyard where Thor's red ball was still tucked away in a corner. He slept curled at my feet, unafraid, sure of himself, as if we'd always been together. He was different from Thor. More restless, more affectionate. He wanted to be around me constantly. He learned to open drawers with his muzzle, hid my socks, pulled the tablecloth just to get attention. But his gaze, oh, that gaze was the same. Deep, entire, trustworthy. For the first time in a long while, I smiled without pain. The HOA no longer existed, officially dissolved. The neighborhood is now a shapeless group of people who pretend to live peacefully but avoid crossing my path on the sidewalk. I'm still the woman who took things too far, the one they don't want to approach so they won't get involved, the one who exposed everyone, who didn't bow her head. Kids still look at me curiously. Some parents pull them away when Loki and I pass by, like he's dangerous, like I'm contagious. But I've learned to live like this. I don't expect a good morning anymore. I don't expect invitations, friendly neighbors, gatherings. I don't need them. The front gate now has a new sign. Loki lives here, and no one takes what's his. Loki's become my natural alarm. He barks at everything. I don't stop him. Now I let him bark as much as he wants, because each bark is a reminder that this house is his, too. If they don't like it, they can shut their windows. Sometimes I still dream of Thor, and in those dreams he isn't sad. He's running alongside Loki, as if they've met, as if they know their stories are now intertwined. I look at Loki, and I know I'll never replace Thor. But I also know that loving again doesn't mean forgetting. It means resisting. Loki brought back the joy they tried to rip away. And whoever wants to call me lonely, let them. Loneliness is the neighborhood that lives in silence, pretending nothing happened. I don't. Here, in this piece of land, in this marked house, lives a woman who faced them all and won. With a leash, with love, with barking, and with Loki.